Hello and welcome to the Rating Room podcast. It's Jay and Andy again.
Today we're recording another special episode. Please welcome to the Rating Room, Luke. Luke, thanks for coming on the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thanks for having me. So my name's Luke Arnold. I'm from London in England. I've been collecting James Bond memorabilia since I was quite young. Love the films, go to movie premieres and stuff like that. I've even wrote and made my own little trailer for YouTube, which is a bit of fun, and have an Instagram account called Live Like 007. So yeah, it's everything Bond. I've loved it for years, and thanks for the opportunity to come on your show.
So listeners, you need to check out Luke's Instagram. There's loads of stuff about James Bond on there, and we're going to talk about Luke's collections a bit later on. But before we start, we've been looking at your Instagram and we've noticed you've been somewhere special in the last week. Do you just want to tell our listeners about this?
I was quite fortunate enough through work to get an invite to the BAFTAs in central London, which was amazing. They held it in the National Gallery, which for all the Bond listeners out there, obviously that's quite special to the Craig film Skyfall, where he first met Q, which was awesome because I managed to get a picture with no one around with the big painting in there as well. But I was very lucky. Yeah, it was a fantastic event. So
when you're at the BAFTAs, Luke, before we just get into James Bond, who did you meet there?
Quite a few. I was quite surprised because, sometimes you think these kind of things might be like a tick box. A couple of celebs will turn up and vanish very quickly just to show their face. But so Michelle Yeoh was there, which we all know as Wei Lin from Tomorrow Never Dies. The lady herself, Barbara Broccoli. Don't need to say who that is, but yeah, she was there. We had the legend that is Brendan Fraser. He turned up, and I had a great chat with him about, cause he's one of my childhood heroes, grew up watching The Mummy and Blast from the Past and films like that. Got to have a chat with him in a selfie. Eddie Redmayne, I think he's the guy from Fantastic Beasts, from the Harry Potter franchise. Colin Farrell was there. I forget his name now, but the little Chinese lad that was in Indiana Jones, that's now in the new one that's just coming out, he was there as well. Some really, really good names. And then on the night itself, Remy Malek was there, Ana de Armas was there. I think, who else was there? Yeah, I think they were the main ones from Bond, but unfortunately no Craig. So it was a really good evening.
Yeah, sounds really cool. Without going too inside, what's the experience like of the BAFTAs for the general public versus the big celebs? Did you get to mingle much, or is it kind of two separate experiences? How does it work?
It was really odd because we got these tickets and we were told where to go entrance wise, and it was me and my boss that went, and we ended up walking up the red carpet, and we were quite early. Normally you don't want to be early to events, but I thought, hey ho. So we're walking up the red carpet, and there's loads of fans clearly waiting for celebrities, and they're all looking at each other going, who are these two? Who are these two? And it's like, great, brilliant. And then we went in, got a glass of champagne each, and it sounds bad, but just loitered around. But then all of these celebrities turned up, masters of the industry, cinematographers and people like that. There was a lot of people you just wouldn't really recognise. Then the celebrities started to come through, and you could literally just walk up and chat to them. And it was funny because my boss kind of broke the boundary of approaching someone for a selfie. She loves Richard E. Grant, and he was standing there, he's looking all dapper. And she went, oh my God, there he is. And she literally ran over to him and went, Richard. And he turned around and she went, you don't know me, but can I have a selfie? And he was like, oh yeah, of course you can. And I think that kind of just broke the awkwardness of, there were two people there that probably shouldn't have been there. But, it was, that was quite funny. And then obviously straight after that was Brendan Fraser, which was just amazing.
That's brilliant. That's really, I don't know, a bit jealous, Andy, about Luke's night out at the BAFTAs.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, we'll be there one day collecting our awards for this podcast, of course. But,
Oh hell yeah, definitely. Especially after this one, come on.
yeah, when they cast me in the role as the next James Bond.
Oh,
I've been auditioning throughout the podcast. I'm close.
So let's continue on with the James Bond theme now. So let's get into it. And this is a similar format to our previous guest episode. So I'm going to throw the first question at you, Luke. So what is your earliest Bond memory?
earliest. So the one that really sticks to me, non-collectible wise, would be probably quite young, and ITV decided to do a Bond marathon. I think it was over weekends. So it's like every Saturday and Sunday they'd show a film or two. And we had a VHS player in the TV room, and I'd sit in there with a blank VHS. Probably most of the listeners that are young of age haven't got a clue what a VHS is these days. But and then I'd bang that in the machine, and I'd sit there and I'd record the Bond film, but I'd stop it when it was the commercial breaks, and then quickly rewind it so it was like dead on. So there was no breaks in the film. And then wrote the movie on the side of each VHS tape, and then built the collection up. So I think that's where really it started to get a bit serious.
Do you remember the first film?
Well, the first one,
yeah.
the first I watched. Well, they were in order. So that obviously Dr. No was the first, but my first ever Bond film that I watched was actually The Living Daylights, with Timothy Dalton. And I don't know why that just happened to be on TV. They normally show them at Christmas and stuff like that, didn't they? And I don't know why I watched it. But I put it on. I think GoldenEye, the game, was probably coming out at some point. So I thought, let me check this out. Even though I had a few little bits, around at Corgi cars and stuff like that. So yeah, Living Daylights was the first one I actually saw. And I had a Talk Boy from Home Alone 2, one of those little recorders. And I loved the music, the opening scene where he's doing the little paintball kind of MI6 testing. And I loved the music, and I recorded the music. So when I was young, I was in the bath, I could listen to the soundtrack. Shouldn't probably admit that, but there you go.
Sounds brilliant. It's funny you mentioned the movie marathon on ITV, because I've mentioned this on previous episodes. It was kind of a thing when I was, I don't know, maybe 12, 13. And ITV, I think, like you said, they were playing one a week. So it might have been around the same time. And then the next day in the school playground, the talk was, did you see the Bond film? And it was just like really, really exciting at the time. And that's kind of how I got into it as well. But let's move on to the next question. So 25 films in total. Assuming you've seen them all, do you have a particular favourite?
I do indeed. It's Casino Royale. So Craig's obviously first hurrah, and what an amazing start for Daniel Craig, really, after all of the controversy about his blonde hair and being ugly, and he had to wear a life jacket on the River Thames. But yeah, Casino Royale is my favourite film.
Is there anything in particular that you like about what makes it stand out from the other Bond films?
I think, coming from Pierce's last run with Die Another Day, which went a bit too fantastical and a bit too silly. And I know they were trying to chuckle, I think it's the 50th anniversary, they're trying to chuck stuff in there for it, with nods and winks. So I think to have Craig step into a more gritty, Bourne-esque, even though I don't like him being paired to Bourne, but Bourne-esque kind of film. Martin Campbell, phenomenal director, obviously done GoldenEye. David Arnold, who does the music. It just had everything in one kind of go, and to show 007 getting his first couple of kills, getting his 007 grade, but also having that bit of awkwardness with M. She doesn't really trust him. Should she have promoted him? And there's some classic lines. And that ending of him in the suit walking up the stairs with that massive MP5, and I think it was an MP5, and Bond, James Bond. And you've been waiting for that for the whole film, because he didn't say it once. And how do you say it? Do I look like I give a damn? And all things like that. It was a really awesome first film, and bless him, Chris Cornell with the song, which I think is one of the best songs as well.
I know it's your favourite Bond film, but do you think Casino Royale is the strongest film for introducing a new Bond actor?
Yeah, I think it made it more prominent that this is a new actor, because they went back to show him gaining his 00 status. You know, if you looked at the others, you had Connery, iconic, round the table. You know, admire your courage, Mr. Bond, James Bond. You know, brilliant. Lazenby's was a little bit, I find, tongue-in-cheek. You know, this never happened to the other fellow, looking at the screen, bit, you know. Roger Moore's was great. It was just subtle. You know, he's in there necking with a lovely lady in bed, you know, which was obviously the the whole run of Roger Moore films. Brosnan's was cool. You know, the dam jump at the facility and beg your pardon, forgot to knock. You know, keeping his face in silhouette all the way through until he knocked someone out on the lavvy. So I think it's a really good intro to Craig's Bond, because it started from the beginning as such. And it didn't really have any ties to the old films, where Brosnan still could have been the Bond from the old Live and Let Dies and that kind of thing. They never had like their own storybook. I call the Craig films their own storybook. The others don't exist. It's just Craig's story as Bond.
That's interesting, Andy, because you've kind of talked about that, haven't you, in terms of Daniel Craig is kind of its own little arc separate from the others.
It is, yeah. And I've tried to use that as my persuasion to get my wife watching the films, because she's adamant she doesn't like Bond. I'm like, no, but this is different. You'll like this mini Bond series of 5, not the whole 25. But she's not having it.
So, Luke, you've obviously talked about your favourite Bond film. So, looking at the other end, do you have a kind of the film that you struggle with, or the one that you think is the worst in the franchise?
So easy. Straight Out Octopussy, 100%. Bond dressed as a clown, messing about. No, didn't like it. I know a lot of people don't like A View to a Kill because Roger Moore's a bit too old, and his stunt double is obviously someone completely younger with a wig on, and is getting off with a very young Stacey Sutton, which is a bit creepy. But yeah, I can't watch Octopussy. I've watched it a few times, obviously. I just don't like it. The tuck chase when you had the guy on the back batting things away with a tennis racket, and I think that then went a bit too comical for Bond. It was more kind of taking the mickey out of Roger Moore and how silly he could be. I didn't like it. It was more spoofy, like the original Casino Royale for me, than a proper Bond film. Still a great film, and it obviously went up against Never Say Never Again, which doesn't count, and it won the battle. But for me, yeah, I think it's probably one of the weakest films in the whole series. If
me and Andy had to push you on Octopussy, is there anything that you think is good in the film?
Maud Adams, for obvious reasons. Yeah, she. You know, I don't click with Kamal Khan. I think he's a very weird kind of villain. You know, Roger Moore running away from them, hunting on elephants. But yeah, Maud Adams obviously coming from The Man with the Golden Gun, which she was in as well. So it's a bit odd that she was in those two films as completely different characters. But yeah, you know, she's wonderful, beautiful, great, you know, lovely. That's the only, and Desmond Llewellyn obviously, because he's always great. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me, unfortunately. People will hate me now. They're not even going to check out my Instagram anymore now. They're just like, it'll get banned or something. So
no, I must say it wouldn't be my worst. I think regular listeners will know Moonraker is my particular pet peeve about Bond, but I think Octopus is pretty low down the list as well. Let's change tack just slightly and talk about actors. So we've briefly mentioned Craig and Moore. Would either of those be your favourite, or do you have another one in mind for the Bond mantle?
It's a tricky one, and that is whenever I meet clients with the work I'm in, chatting to you guys, anything, any events. Who's your favourite Bond? And they're all phenomenal. That's why we all love the series so much, because they all bring something incredibly different to the role. For me, just that kind of connection with a Bond is Pierce Brosnan. GoldenEye 64, GoldenEye the movie. I was at the age where I could start to collect a little bit, you know, new watch and stuff like that. and he's just great. And I think he was just let down a little bit on some of the writing of the later films. But he's a very close tie with Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig has done wonders for the franchise for those last 5 films. And so, yeah, but Brosnan, I think if I had to put a gun to my head, it would be Brosnan, yeah.
So, Luke, in your line of business, I understand you've met some of the Bond actors. Which Bond actors have you met?
Yeah, so I work in the watch industry, and I was quite fortunate enough one day to have Mr. Jonathan Pryce come into the store, which was amazing. And I played dumb, and I was very calm and collected, and he needed a watch repaired. And he said, I'll come back next time. I haven't got it with me now, and I thought that was it. I won't see him again. And then the next day he actually came in, and then I was a little bit more dumbstruck, but I still played it cool. And casually, as we were just talking, as I was checking his watch in, I dropped that I'm a bit of a Bond fan. I collect Bond watches. And he was like, oh, yes, young man, I didn't know if you were aware, but I've been in a Bond film. And that's kind of where I was like, look, yeah, Mr. Pryce, I know exactly who you are. I think I actually said Mr. Carver, which made him grin a little bit. And then we just sat, and it was awesome. I'm at work getting paid to chat to Elliot Carver. And yeah, we talked about the films. He owns one of Pierce Brosnan's screen-used Amigas, because apparently Brosnan went up to him and was like, look, which one do you want? I don't need all of them. And he gave him one of his Amigas, so he's got that. And he did say he'd got a couple of other bits from the set, but he didn't tell me what exactly. And then I was quite cheeky and asked him if I could get a DVD that I just happened to have, obviously, as you do at work. And yeah, he signed it. And the really cool thing was he signed it and he put at the bottom, "Let the mayhem begin." And apparently Jonathan Pryce never puts quotes from his films or anything on anything he signs. And he said to me, he went, I've just put on a little quote for you there as well, young man, and that was just awesome. It just shows that, these actors are amazingly nice people as well. So yeah, that was quite cool.
So moving on, obviously you've just told us who your favourite Bond actor is and your favourite film, etc. So do you have a particular favourite theme song out of the franchise? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, so I have 2. I've put one down. I think like the main one I could listen to all the time would be "You Know My Name" by Chris Cornell, the late Chris Cornell. Just a fantastic song. Punchy, like hard rock, really good, great vocals. And I was a fan of him when he was in Soundgarden anyway. But that song is fantastic and goes so well with the opening credits of Casino Royale. It just works. But I think that it's very tied now with We Have All the Time in the World, which was one of my all-time favourite songs out of Bond anyway. But I think with the end of No Time to Die, that song means quite a lot to me, and it is quite a regular that's played now on my phone. I think it's even my alarm tone as well, just the orchestral version of it. So, You Know My Name is something you can listen to all the time without being sad, but I think because of the end of No Time to Die now, We Have All the Time in the World, brings a tear to one's eye. When you're sitting on the train, it don't look too good.
It is. It's a beautiful ending, and I like the callback. Obviously, they use that on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I like that they use that again, but it fits perfectly with the film. But moving on to the next question, we can't talk James Bond without talking Bond girls. So of the many Bond girls that there have been over the years, do you have any favourites?
I have 2 standout favourites, 100%. So one would be Eva Green, Vesper Lynd from Casino Royale. And the other would be the stunningly beautiful Jane Seymour, who played Solitaire in Live and Let Die. I was fortunate enough to meet Eva Green at the Casino Royale premiere. I went with my best mate. And it was phenomenal. I took one of the Bond on set books because I always like to try and get them signed because you can't really carry posters or anything, when you're walking the red carpet and stuff, it looks a bit dodgy. So I had the Bond on set book, and I was so sad. I had every page prepped with a little sticky note so I knew which actor I could jump the page to quickly, because they'd they haven't got all the time in the world. Oh, sorry, I didn't even mean that. There you go. But they haven't got the time to obviously wait for you to find the right page. But I picked this picture of Eva Green, and she's laying in a green dress on a boat on the river with a cigarette. And I'm not a fan of smoking, but she just looks incredible. And when I asked her to sign it, she said, "Oh, why have you picked that picture?" I was like, and I don't know why. It was quite sad, really. But I was like, "Because you look absolutely incredible." And she just grinned at me. She went, "Oh, thank you so much." And she signed it. And as she was walking away, she turned around and blew me a kiss. And my best mate punched me. I don't think he meant to punch me as hard as he did, but he did. And he was like, "Oh my God, mate, she just winked at you." I was like, "Of course." So pathetic. But yeah, so that was really, really cool. Unfortunately, I haven't had the luxury of meeting Jane Seymour. But even now, she still looks as incredible as she did back in Live and Let Die, to be honest. So yeah, those two definitely stand out for me.
Have you met any other Bond girls?
Yeah, I've been once again lucky enough to go to pretty much all of the Bond premieres since Die Another Day. So at that one, I was with my mum, bless her. We went to it was at the Royal Albert Hall. I think it was the first one that was at the Royal Albert Hall. But we were there just as kind of viewers, you know, to see people turn up and everything. But from Casino Royale onwards, I've been lucky enough to be on the red carpet and walk and mingle and stuff. So I've met all of the Bond girls pretty much from Casino all the way to No Time. But older Bond girls as well, Miriam Diablo, she goes to a hell of a lot of events. She's really chatty, really lovely. Honor Blackman, late Honor Blackman, I met her. I'm trying to think of it. There's quite a few of them, to be honest with you. I go to a couple of Bond meetups in London every now and then for events, and they sometimes have, if they're lucky enough to get them, a couple of Bond girls or extras in the movies, and they can turn up. So yeah, I've met a few of them. Michelle Yeoh, obviously, the other day at the BAFTAs, so that was quite cool to meet Wei Lin from Brosnan's. But that was, I think, the only Brosnan one I've met. So
moving on, do you have a particular favourite villain? So this could be a main villain, one of the henchmen.
Yeah, a lot of people go for all of those standouts. Audit Goldfinger, Baron Samedi, all those kind of villains. But I really, really loved Elliot Carver. So Jonathan Pryce. Now, it's not just because I met him and he signed something. But he was great in that film. And I think Tomorrow Never Dies is kind of a forgotten one for the Brosnan film series. Everyone's GoldenEye, and then they all have a go at Die Another Day, which is rightly so. But Tomorrow Never Dies, it was a really, really good film. And, Stamper, who was Elliot Carver's sidekick, he was obviously originally penned to be the guy that had the bullet in the brain that couldn't feel any pain, but they carried that on into The World Is Not Enough instead. But Elliot Carver he's a media mogul, going to literally start a war because he's so out of his mind that's going to help his ratings. And it was all that a popularity thing, which I think is so real in today's kind of world with your TikToks and all that kind of thing. Everyone wants to try and be a celebrity on all these things. And that's what he wanted to be. He wanted to be famous, but through any means. And that's dangerous. That's just a dangerous villain, really. You've got these crazy guys like wants to blow up Fort Knox and make all the gold radioactive and all things like that, which is a fantastic side of Bond. But actually, Elliot Carver is a bit of a git, really. He wanted to cause a war and kill millions of people just so he became the top news coverage, It's a pretty dodgy plan. So, yeah, I really like him. And he had some great lines, there's no news like bad news and things like that, He was just great. So, yeah, for me, I think he's quite a standout that a lot of people tend to forget, really, in the franchise.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it. It's almost ahead of its time, that film. And in today's context, not really thought of it like that before.
Yeah, it's a crazy one. And And yeah, they had the car chase, which was actually filmed in Brent Cross's car park at the big shopping centre in Brent Cross, not in Hamburg, Germany. But it had, crazy tech. It had the mobile phone that could open up, which a few years later Nokia made, and it was a little computer thing. So it is quite weird how some of the Bond movies do kind of like see into the future. It's weird. But yeah, it's Tomorrow Never Dies is a great film. The song was a bit weak, I think, at the beginning of the film, but it is a really good film. It's one of my favourites.
Yeah, so another thing we talk about on the main pod are some of our favourite scenes from each film. So across the last 60 plus years, what are the scenes that stand out to you as being the most memorable?
You've got the big, crazy, famous ones, do you expect me to talk? No, I expect you to die on the laser table. For me, the dam jump to the facility in GoldenEye is absolutely incredible that someone done that. That's a real stunt. I love it when they're real stunts, which is why I'm so pleased that we didn't use too much CGI. Take out Die Another Day. But you got the Thames chase in the Q-boat with the phenomenal soundtrack from David Arnold. That is really great. And then climbing up the Millennium Dome and all things and dropping on it and stuff like that. That's a damn good opening scene to a film. So I loved that. Casino Royale opening scene was really cool. The black and white, that was very good. And it was longer. I don't know if you've seen it. You should check it out on the DVDs. They've done a special deluxe edition. And that opening scene is actually even longer. And you see Bond stalking his first kill through some kind of like Ascot races kind of thing. Or no, it's a cricket. I think it's a cricket match, actually. And it's really cool. It's a shame they cut it down just for the cinematic release. Because, to see Bond being a bit sneaky and going after his final kill, it's really, really cool. But, Bond films are well known for all of their opening pre-title sequences, and they always try and beat the previous and get better and better and better. But yeah, I think Dam Jump, the Thames Chase from World Is Not Enough, they're fantastic standouts.
Yeah, the Thames Chase of that list kind of stands out to me. That film, World Is Not Enough, was the first Bond film I saw in the cinema.
Oh, wow.
So seeing that in the cinema was like, wow, this is something else. And then Jay and I have rewatched The World Is Not Enough recently, and it stands up. I think it's a criminally underrated film, has to be said. Great
film, and they get to absolutely drench two traffic wardens, which everyone is happy about. Apparently, those two guys were only meant to get a little bit wet. That's what was agreed. And then when they flicked the boat round, they absolutely pelted these guys. And they were like, oh, well, sorry,
Better to beg forgiveness than ask permission, as the old saying goes, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So, moving on, do you have a favourite gadget?
I'm probably biased on this one because I sell them. So for me, it's got to be the watches. From the first time you see proper Bond watch where he's sitting at the poker table and it's a Gruen Precision with his tux, and then the most famous watch starting, I think, is the Submariner, the Rolex Submariner in Goldfinger on that little NATO strap, which is fantastic. And then all the way through, it's always pretty much been a Rolex, and it went into Seiko and Pulsar and things like that with Roger Moore, and then back to Rolex for Timothy Dalton, and then for me, the Bond watch is the Omega. So I'm lucky to have a few of them. So the Omega Seamaster from GoldenEye with the laser, that's just awesome. Everyone would love a watch with a laser in it. Oh, you can't get in that door. Oh, cut the door open. Oh, I need to escape through that hatch before I get blown up. Yeah, I'll use the laser on my watch. Don't know how the laser was produced. No idea, because the watch was still very thin, but there you go. But that's that Omega Seamaster from GoldenEye all the way through to Die Another Day, and even in Casino for a few bits. That had so many gadgets on it. So you had the GoldenEye laser, and you also had the detonator, in Die Another Day, where he put it in the box of diamonds. You had a grappling hook on it from The World Is Not Enough. And with the very strong LEDs when he was in the snow kind of jacket bubble thing. So yeah, the Omega Seamaster is damn good gadget. And it's something everyone can wear, which is cool, you know. So it's not an attaché case that would look a bit odd walking around with like that kind of bag these days. But you can walk around with a nice watch on. So yeah, the Omega Seamaster and and the laser attachment was pretty damn awesome to me.
So in the season 1 of the podcast, Andy talks about the gadgets. Andy, from memory, we don't track the different types of watches in this series. Luke, do you know whether they keep to a particular brand per Bond actor, or do they change watches within like that arc of a Bond actor?
Yeah, so from what I know, and I may be wrong, so I apologise if I am to anyone listening, but with Connery, it was the Gruen Precision first of all, then Rolex, but he also used a Breitling top timer in Thunderball as a Geiger counter. When it went to Lazenby, he used a Rolex chronograph before it was called the Daytona. And you see that quite briefly when he's breaking into a safe. Then it went back to the Submariner with Roger Moore and obviously the rotating bezel and the magnet. But then Roger Moore went a little bit crazy and we got into that kind of digital world in the late 70s, 80s. And he used a lot of Seikos. So just normal digital. He used the Pulsar, which was in Live and Let Die, which they've just re-released actually. It's now called the Hamilton Pulsar. It's exactly the same, which is quite cool. Timothy Dalton used a Rolex Submariner, but he also had the Tag Heuer Night Diver, which was really, really cool watch, black, but the whole dial glowed in the dark. It was very, very cool. And you see that just at that kind of MI6 training at the beginning. But it was Lindy Hemming who introduced Pierce with the Seamaster from Omega. She said he was a naval man. He would want to wear something quite nice. And, you know, the Seamaster kind of ticked those boxes. It was quite a luxury, elegant watch, but very rugged because it's also a diver's watch. And it just had that element that it could have gadgets attached to it. You know, the helium escape valve on the side. You know, perfect, you know, pop that out and you've got a nice little detonator. So I think they're the main ones all the way through the series. I might have missed one or two, but I think I got most of them.
Well, some good knowledge there for not only the listeners, but Jay and I as well. We're learning something ourselves. I'm going to bring the tone down slightly with my next question. So there's been a lot of high points over the Bond franchise. There's been a few lows as well. What would you say is the lowest point of the franchise?
The lowest possible. I think I've already mentioned it. Bond as a clown. What, like, come on. It's so annoying. Jane, don't, you'll wind me up now. I'll get on a rant now. He's disarming a bomb in a circus. That's cool. That's fine. He doesn't need to dress up as a clown. He's wasted time dressing as a clown and putting makeup on. He's wasted time on the bomb. You know, you could have deactivated it quicker. You know, I really hate that film.
We talked about the that scene, and how is it even possible for him? Because he's against the clock, quite literally, and not only does he take the time to just throw on a clown outfit, but he does a really good job actually with the clown makeup. So he's taken time and care on it, but there's no time. Yeah. I'm not going to rant with you, but I feel your pain.
It's like you look at Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight with the makeup, and apparently he puts the makeup on himself and you can see it on his fingers. You know, Roger Moore had time to wash his hands as well. And I've put makeup on before when I've gone to Comic-Con. It takes a while to get it off your fingers, but he was fine. You know, he looked great. So unless someone done the makeup for him, you know, and then, that film. So annoying. But I think Die Another Day had quite a few low points in it as well. You asked me to pick one, but crikey, let's surf a tsunami with the worst green screen in the history of the world. That is just unforgivably bad. Poor Pierce. And Pierce laughs about it. If you watch, I think it's Being Bond or something, one of the TV kind of documentaries, even Pierce just laughs about it now. He's like, I rode a tsunami, you know, that's all out Bond, that is, you know. So yeah, Die Another Day is pretty shocking as well, to be honest with you, with a lot of it. But it's got some great points as well, though. But it's, yeah, the worst is Bond as a clown, for God's sake.
So, Luke, before I ask my next question, something you said there has kind of intrigued me. So, when you went to Comic-Con, which characters were you dressed up as, requiring, you use makeup? Obviously, it might not be James Bond, it might be something else, but when did you use makeup?
Yeah, so my first ever Comic-Con I went to, I went as the worst Heath Ledger's Joker that you could see. It was an outfit brought from, one of these cheap costume shops, a really bad wig, and I'd done the makeup myself, so the black eyes and everything, it was really naff. But the next time I went to Comic-Con, I kind of upped it a level, and I went as Heath Ledger as the nurse from The Dark Knight, and I'd done it as screen accurate as I could possibly do, and it was really good. But it was the first time I went to a Comic-Con and no one was dressed like Heath Ledger's Joker as a nurse. So it was awesome. You feel like a mild celebrity, everyone's wanting pictures, and I always wanted to be an actor when I was younger, so I can do voices, and I kind of learnt the laugh and stuff. So I would talk to people as kind of Heath's Joker. So yeah, I've done that, and then I've done Wolverine at Comic-Con. That was quite a good one, and now I've done Bond a couple of times. But no one's bothered about Bond at Comic-Con. You walk around in a tux, and people just think you've gone to the wrong event. No one really wants a picture of some random bloke pretending to be James Bond. But when you build these amazing costumes that some people see, Iron Man suits and things, that's when people want the pictures and start to have a chat. Everyone ignores you as Bond. Although I met George Lazenby at a Comic-Con, and I had a Walther PPK. And it had a little red tip in the end of it, so clearly it's not on this. I'm queuing up, and I'm just about to walk over to George, and this big guy ran over to me, grabbed me, he's like, what are you doing? I was like, what? I mean, you've got a gun, he's got a gun. I was like, mate, it's Comic-Con, it's a toy gun. He went, what? I went, do you really think I'm going to queue up for 3 hours to meet George Lazenby and then shoot him? Like, come on, I could have done that from a while away, and everyone was laughing at this bloke, and he was doing his job, but yeah, I'm not really going to go in a tuxedo and assassinate George Lazenby at Comic-Con. That would be quite weird. And I paid for it as well, it'd be pointless.
So another follow-up question. You said that you wanted to be an actor when you were younger. If you could have acted in one Bond film, so you don't necessarily have to be James Bond, it could have been any character in a James Bond film, which film would you pick?
God, wow, that's a question. What film would I pick? That's a tricky question. I quite like The Living Daylights. I think that's a really cool film. It's got some cool stunts and stuff in it. Obviously, if I was to be an actor in them, I'd want to be Bond, as everyone would, or the villain, because I think if you're as an actor to play a villain, and you can really go crazy with some of the roles. Everyone I've ever spoken to that's played a villain has always said it's more fun, than the hero sometimes. But yeah, Living Daylights would have been quite cool. Trying to think. Casino Royale, GoldenEye. Everyone's played GoldenEye 64 probably. So to actually portray James Bond doing the facility or the military archives and those levels, that'd be quite cool. Yeah. So I'd say GoldenEye. That'd be quite cool.
In our main season, each of the films, myself and Andy pick out some of our favourite one-liners from each of the films. So out of the whole 25 films, do you have a particular favourite one-liner or a quote?
I use probably too much. Shocking, positively shocking. Love that. Great in Goldfinger when he smacks the lamp into the bath. But you can use that quite a lot day to day, which is quite funny. Especially at work when someone's watch has stopped working. You go, it's positively shocking. And they're like, what? Like, what? And I've got a guy at work, Sonny, he's awesome. I call him 006 because I tested him on the official James Bond test and he was rubbish. So he can be a 006. And yeah, he every morning he walks in and he's like, 007, I'm like 006. Or he'll walk past when I'm trying to talk to a client and he's like, oh, shocking. Oh, good day to you. And it's like the worst Sean Connery. I mean, or he just walk past and go, yes. And you're like, Yeah, right, Sonny, cool. But most of the clients that come in now understand my my love of Bond, so they kind of just roll their eyes and on we go.
It's a good Connery you do, by the way. I've got to work on my
it's not.
accents now for the show. It is. Jay's heard me try terrible accents for many, many weeks now, and yeah.
Every accent I used to sound like Borat. So
I do exactly the same thing. When you stay in the accent for too long, it could be Scottish, it could be German, it could be South American. It all becomes Borat in the end. Let's get back on track. So another feature of our main pod is differences between the Bond movies and the Bond books. So my question is, have you read any of the Bond books, either the novels or short stories by Fleming or the more recent ones?
Yeah, I think as a Bond fan, you have to do yourself justice of reading the original literature from Fleming as well, because they are very different from the films. A book can take quite a while to read it. A film has to be a certain time. Corners are cut. Characters aren't really described as much. You just visually see it in the film. So yeah, I've read of the Flemings. I've got them behind me. So yeah, I like them. I'm quite lucky enough to have a first edition of On Her Majesty's Secret Service and Goldfinger, which are quite cool in the collection to have. The rest of them are just like the normal released box set ones. But I read some of the others, Never Dream of Dying by Richard Benson and people like that. I've got a few of those books. I've tried to read them. I'm not a book reader. I don't really enjoy it. I even tried to listen to the audiobook versions. Just couldn't get on with it. I think my mind pictures something too different from what they then describe in the book. So I can't, I try and make up my own kind of look of it, and it doesn't always match into the book. I'm trying to think what the one I was reading recently. Oh, Forever and a Day. So I've been reading that. And I got about halfway through and I just couldn't finish it, which is annoying because I want to know how it ends. But I get a bit bored of reading after a while, to be honest with you.
At the time of recording this episode, they've not announced who the next James Bond actor is. And earlier on in the season, myself and Andy released a special bonus episode we talked about the book's top 10 favourite actors to play Bond, and then myself and Andy pulled out 4 wild cards. So Luke, do you have a favourite actor that you think would be best suited for Bond, and why is that?
Yeah, it's probably everyone will roll their eyes and get bored of it. It's Henry Cavill. But I've wanted Henry Cavill for quite some time, even when they were announcing Craig, and Henry Cavill was mentioned. I was Team Cavill all the way. He's an awesome guy. He loves the franchise. He's a great actor, and he looks brilliant. He's a good-looking guy. I think he's got elements of Connery and Brosnan in the way he looks with the hair and that. He's a little bit bulky. I think he needs to lose that a bit, but obviously he had that for Superman, which he's now not anymore. The scene in Mission Impossible, with him kind of loading his arms when he was having that fight in the toilet was damn good. It was really, really cool. And I don't know if you've seen I think it's by Tonics or something. He's like an ambassador for a water brand or something now. And he'd done this brilliant advert where he was in Huntsman in Savile Row, which was the same suit tailor shop as Kingsman. And he walks out and he says, he's something like, and for your next adventure or something like that. And he looks down, there's like an Aston Martin DB5 parked right in front of him. I think he'd be great, but I also have quite a radical idea of where I'd want the films to go moving forward if he was selected. Which people would probably get quite irate about, or maybe they wouldn't. I don't know. But yeah, I would love Henry Cavill. Taylor Johnson or Aaron? Yeah, I think it's Aaron Taylor Johnson. He'd be quite good. I've seen a few fake photos of him mocked up as Bond, so he could be quite good. I think that Barbara says she's looking for someone for a 10-year stretch that's younger that can last. So I think Cavill at 40 now, I think he might be just on the cusp of not getting it, unfortunately. But who knows? We will see.
Yeah, I was going to say Cavill's pushing 40 already, so it might be a short run. We've got to put your theory to the test. Let's get let's get the listeners irate. Where do you want the Bond franchise to go next?
It's not a lady, so that's fine. I would love to see, if my ideal thing, I would pick up Henry Cavill and I would drop him in the 60s. So I would set the film way back in the past, in the 60s, kind of like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I don't know if you've seen that, but that was a really good film. The old-fashioned suits, the old-fashioned cars, and they can do that. If you see things like Peaky Blinders and those kind of shows, they can easily recreate the past. But I just think everyone was so anti-Bourne with Craig, it's just a Bourne rip-off, it's a Bourne rip-off. Let's go back to some classic spy, From Russia with Love, those really story-driven kind of Bond films where he's a spy, he needs to do some intelligence, he needs to find out contacts. Yeah, he might sleep with the odd woman to get information and kill the odd person because he's an assassin. I think where the franchise went, Bond had a mission, bit different with Craig because he was always just after Blofeld in the end, but he didn't really gather much intelligence as a spy. He kind of just, bang, there you go, done. He'd get a text from M or voicemail from M, or Tanner would contact him. It was, he'd go and speak to Blofeld a bit and they'd find out that all of a sudden he's got nanobots on him and things like that. There wasn't any spying. In From Russia with Love, he had to meet a woman. He knew it was going to be a trap, but he had to interrogate her on a boat and he had to do this and do that. He had another villain after him in Red Grant, which was really cool, but he didn't know first of all and all that. I kind of would like to see that. So I think you could pick Cavill up. He's very 60s style anyway. You haven't got all crazy gadgets, so no one can moan about that. You're going to have a really good story, but a written good script, maybe a bit of John Barry coming back, with score-wise. David Arnold can do a lot of Barry-esque kind of scores. So, yeah, that's what I'd like to see. And then you can still use a Aston Martin DB5 and things like that as well. So you've still got that kind of Bond 007 history and heritage and look and style, but no one's going to compare it to Mission Impossible, which definitely is going to start happening with the couple of new films that are coming out now.
So it's a really interesting way to go. I like the sound of it. So I'm not alright. I do like the sound of it. My other thought, and this is not really something I would want, but I wonder whether they would go more into the origin story of Bond. So when I think of Craig, I compare it to almost like the Christian Bale Batman run, where he went back to basics. But they didn't really touch on it a great deal. Obviously, they had this is how he became a 00, and then it was he's Bond. But I wonder, could and should they do more of the how did he get to that point? Now, you don't want to go back to the point of, child actor being Bond growing up. That's probably taking it too far.
James Bond Jr.
Well, it could be. But, there's probably something more of like an origin story that could be used. That would lead to itself to being a really young actor for the long term, because then once you've done the origin story, you then have to go into 007 and his missions, etc. But Bond going back to the 60s, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, and I mean, Craig films are phenomenal. I've got the posters all around. Most of my collection is very Craig-esque because I was at that time where I could afford the Craig stuff. But I think the trouble is with it, it's, Quantum had a writer's strike, so they didn't really know what was going on. They were kind of setting up Quantum to be this massive company, villainous company like Spectre. But they couldn't use that because Kevin McClory had the rights to it still and all that kind of thing. So they didn't really go into this kind of spy kind of stuff. And then you went in Skyfall, which was a bit of Bond's heritage. Amazing. Love that film. Skyfall's a genius film. But then all of a sudden, Spectre's around because now we can use the rights. And so we'll ignore Quantum. That doesn't exist. And actually, Dominic Green worked as a kind of branch of Spectre. And bang, we're in Spectre. And there's Blofeld. And now everything's fine. And it just kind of seemed because Daniel Craig wanted to end it at a certain time. And he kind of had a plan that all along he wanted Bond to die. That's why I agree with you. It's kind of like a storybook. You've got Daniel Craig starting. You've got him getting older and realising it in Skyfall. And then you've got, obviously, No Time to Die, which is the end of it. So I don't think they had that, where all the old films were just standalone films. Bond gets his mission, he completes the mission by the end of it. they had to really squeeze a lot into 5 films, which in some essence, some of it seemed a bit rushed and you didn't really find out too much about it. So that's the only reason. I think go back to the 60s. Each Bond film is a standalone film. You know, you could have Smersh, you could have Spectre, you know, either or. And it just runs from that 10-year cycle of the Bond that they've cast. But yeah, what do we know? What do we know?
Indeed, time will tell what they choose to do. One final question before we get into some rankings. Was there a particular film that you were looking forward to more than the others, and did it meet your expectations?
So I definitely would say No Time to Die. You know, obviously we had the unfortunate COVID, and I feel really bad because I remember being at work as COVID was starting to take hand, and they came out with the news that Bond had been delayed. They were going to delay it. I went nuts. I was pathetic. I was like a little child. I was at work. My boss, bless him, told everyone, don't speak to Luke. Leave him alone. He's not happy. And I'm like, what? Bond's delayed. Oh my God. And everyone avoided me. It was pathetic. And, you know, heaven did I know what was going to come because of the COVID thing. So, you know, we had a long time, a year and a half, if not longer, of waiting, even though we'd had a trailer. We knew little segments. We'd had The Watch, which I got literally just before the lockdown happened. So yeah, the anticipation for that was crazy. I remember I was on holiday in Tenerife. I got the soundtrack very, very early sent to me through Contact, which was really cool. And I'm laying around the pool, and it was just normal files. They weren't named files. They were just individual track 1, track 2. And it got to track 2, which was Matera. And I was laying with my two best mates, chilling by the pool, being all cool as you are, you know, soaking up the sun. And I started to cry. It was really pathetic. And I started to cry because that riff of We Have All the Time in the World came in. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell is going on in this film? Why is that in it? You know, they've had no reference to any old Bond films, let alone the music and stuff. And now all of a sudden, that's in it. What is going on? So my mind was playing, you know, I had the soundtrack, like I say, quite a while before. Then I went to the premiere at the Royal Albert Hall, walking the carpet with Remy Malik and Ana de Armas and Daniel and all those, which was awesome. And then sat and watched the film and cried. I was on the edge of my seat, and I'm not even exaggerating for that whole film. I was literally on the edge, and yeah, it went crazy. And by the end of the film, I think I cried 3 times. I cried at the Matera part. I had a little tear when Felix obviously left, and then right at the end, oh my God, yeah, I was a mess at the end of that film. And I'd left the Royal. Well, my friends I was with, this girl that was with them looked around and she was like, oh my God, is Luke all right? And they were like, yeah, he's a bit overwhelmed, you know, he's all right. And I was like, absolute mess. And then, yeah, I went outside, people wanted to talk to me because they recognised me from my Instagram and stuff. I couldn't really talk. You kind of saw it coming, but you thought, it ain't going to happen. There's 25 films. It ain't going to happen. It ain't going to do that. He'll get blown down back into the vault or something, you know, in the bomb room, and he'll be fine. And you might see him in the distance at the end, like very The Dark Knight Rises, you know. But no, they did. They done it. And I was like, oh my God, that's insane. And I think I got the film a little bit before it came out. And even then, I still would watch it and cry. I took my mum, my sister to see it. They cried because they knew what it meant to me. So yeah, No Time to Die, crikey. And I know people, you know, it's a 50-50. People do have a go about it because of killing Bond. But they killed Daniel Craig's Bond. They haven't killed Bond. It still says James Bond will return. They just finished his tenure as Bond, which was great. Like Christian Bale, you know, they finished that in a perfect way. So yeah, No Time to Die for me. That was great. And yes, I love it. My collection of stuff is very No Time to Die. And that film will be with me for a long time. Yeah, great film.
So moving on, in our main season, we rank each of the films each week, Luke. So And we rank different areas. We talk about villains, Bond girls, etc., etc. So, what are your top 5 Bond films in the franchise? Obviously, you mentioned Casino Royale was your number 1 earlier on.
Yeah, so yeah, Casino Royale number 1, and GoldenEye 2. I mean, there's a lot of trying to think of the term. I tried to think earlier, but I can't. There's a lot of memories and connections with GoldenEye. You know, like I say, with the game, and remember having my mates round in the evening playing GoldenEye and nearly failing GCSEs because of that game. So that's tied. But I'd say number 3, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. That's really come of age, that film. George Lazenby, I've met him a couple of times now. What an amazing bloke. Openly admits to destroying his chances in being a major celebrity because of Bond and the way he was. But that film is beautifully written. Absolutely great film. Love it. Living Daylights, number 4. Timothy Dalton, great start. Very underrated film, very underrated Bond. Becoming a bit more popular these days. But yeah, love that film. And then number 5 would be Live and Let Die. Roger Moore's first, maybe led because Jane Seymour's in it, but also has Baron Samedi, you know, the great Rolex watches. You know, it's a really good first film for Roger Moore, and it's a shame that from that, which is quite serious, it's quite a serious film. It's not all silly. It went silly very quickly after that, and they tried to get it back with Few Eyes Only, but I think by that time people were assuming that the Bond franchise is a bit spoofy now, so they didn't do too well. But yeah, Live and Let Die, number 5, definitely.
So I've just realised this, and I don't know if you've done this intentional. So your top 5 films are all feature different Bond actors, and they are all the first the film in that Bond actor's run of films. Is that intentional?
No, I've just noticed that as well. As you were pointing that out. No, that definitely wasn't no, definitely not intentional. But yeah, how odd. But great starts, you know, for each Bond. You know, clearly they done well on their first film.
They set the scene, as it were, in each of those. Yeah, it's a good list. And from memory, I think those 5 are going to be pretty close to my top 5. Certainly, I would say most, if not all, will be in my top 10. But yeah, some cracking films on that list. Moving on, let's talk Bond girls. So let's have a top 5. You mentioned a couple of them earlier, but let's flesh it out 1 to 5.
Yeah, okay. So number 1 would be Vesper Lind, the beautiful Eva Green, just because it's, you know, massive tie to the Daniel Craig films. She was pretty much an element in all of those films. That even came into No Time to Die at the end, you know, and he did miss her, you know, that grave. It was quite sad. But, you know, as well, Eva Green, what an incredible actress. Number 2, Solitaire. Obviously, Jane Seymour, gone into that, won't go into it again. Number 3, controversial. Everyone's going to be annoyed at this. Christmas Jones. The beautiful, she's just lovely. And that's probably why I picked her, to be honest with you, because I can just see her in those little shorts and the vest top running around pretending to be a nuclear physicist. But Denise Richards, crikey, she was lovely. I remember in, I don't know, you guys might have seen it, Wild Things, I don't know, you know, but it's, yeah, I think most people have seen that. But yeah, she was lovely. Not great. Yes, I'm not picking her because she was great. I'm picking her because she was hot. Number 4 would be Paloma from No Time to Die. So Ana de Armas. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to seeing her in Ballerina, the John Wick spin-off, because she's a great actress. She really kicked some ass in that as well, whilst looking incredibly hot. Brilliant. Should have used her more in that film. I actually preferred her character than Nomi in the film. I think, you know, I won't go into it. I think Nomi was put in that for a reason. It wasn't really needed, to be honest with you. She could have been awesome, but they really underused her. And they kind of put a bit more focus on Paloma for what was probably 20-minute scene. It was a bit odd. But she was great. And then last one, Tracy Bond from On Her Majesty's, the only wife of 007. And that ending sucked in that film. I remember watching that for the first time when I was young, and that sucked because you did not see that coming at all. And she was wonderful. She was harder. She beating up Blofeld, and she was, she was fantastic. She probably actually deserves to be higher up. I put her at 5. She probably should have been at 3. I only picked Christmas Jones because she's hot. But yeah, Tracy Bond, fantastic, number 5. Yeah.
So you mentioned Elliot Carver's your favourite Bond villain. So do you have what are your top 5 Bond villains? And like I said earlier, this can be a main villain or one of the henchmen.
So Elliot Carver, number 1. Alec Trevelyan, number 2, from GoldenEye, Sean Bean. Fantastic. Sean Bean's great as a villain in it. Well, he's always cast as a villain pretty much in everything he does. But really like Sean Bean, great actor, and was really good. A 00 that's turned. And you could see that vulnerability in Pierce Brosnan as his 007. It was his friend. They done missions together. That's some betrayal. So that he was really cool. Rael Silva from Skyfall. Wow, Javier Bardem. What makes you think this is my first time? Absolutely fantastic villain. Awesome guy. When we chatted at the premiere, wow. He's really, really cool. And he's quite a sinister looking bloke. He's been quite unfortunate, but he looks quite, he could really take you out. He could be a villain. Number 4, just for old sake, Goldfinger, classic. Great lines, great actor. I still always see him as in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang though, as a king, which is quite weird. And then lastly, Baron Samedi from Live and Let Die. I think probably one of the only kind of villains to survive. I might be wrong. But, he died a few times, or did he? And then he ended up on the train at the end. So, he could come back at any time. And I really liked that. That was quite cool. It's a shame they didn't bring him back, but I can see why. He probably wouldn't have dropped in some voodoo kind of god in any other film. Wouldn't probably, like Moonraker, that would have made sense. Or he could have dressed as a clown. But anyway, Baron Samedi probably would be the last cool villain from that, yeah.
Yeah, really cool villain. I'm a big pro wrestling fan, and he was the inspiration behind the Papa Shango character, which for any wrestling fans from the early 90s will remember Papa Shango as being a kind of a voodoo type wrestler, which again, bit of a geek fest on my behalf there. But let's get back to Bond. So I won't make you do top 5 because there's only 6, so we might as well do all 6. How would you rank the Bond actors?
Everyone's going to hate me now, but here we go. So Pierce Brosnan, number 1. Daniel Craig, very, very, very close, number 2. Timothy Dalton, number 3. George Lazenby, number 4. Sean Connery at 5. And Roger Moore at 6. Now, that doesn't mean I don't like all of them. I love them all. They all bring something amazing to Bond. I just felt like Roger Moore was just too comical. Sean, though they're great films, but they are a little dated now. The old blue screen in the background, green screen effect, whatever it was, that really wasn't. It was just a video, basically, of pretending that they're driving and his bad wig. But still phenomenal. And I know he started the whole franchise. I think for me, what kicks as a bit of a Bond fan is how Sean was with the films out of filming. He's horrible to Cubby and Harry Saltzman. He would refuse to act when I think it was Harry Saltzman walked onto set. He wouldn't talk to Cubby Broccoli. And to be honest, they made him. I believe he was a funeral hearse carrier and things like that, a milkman, and he'd done bodybuilding and stuff like that. If it wasn't for Bond films, it probably wouldn't have made him. And I agree. When he went to Japan, people were taking pictures of him in the toilet, and he didn't have his privacy. But to be that way, because of that's always kind of been a bit salty with me. I still love his films. I still love him. I never got to meet him, unfortunately, but that's probably why he's a lot lower, because I think the other guys, a bit more grateful for the role. Even though Lazenby ruined it, he can sit there and openly admit that he done it himself,
This might be obvious, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. If you could pick any Bond actor to have one more film within their run, who would it be? Would it be Pierce Brosnan because he's your favourite Bond actor, or would you choose someone else?
And actually, this is always something that us kind of people would dream of, is if they stayed for one more, because it'd be amazing to see. So you'd see George Lazenby do Diamonds Are Forever. That would be really weird. You know, it'd be cool, but it would be weird. Would it have ever happened? You know, because of the way Lazenby portrayed Bond, it wouldn't work in that film. Pierce Brosnan, you know, you could have seen him doing The Living Daylights instead of Lazenby, you know, because that's when he was actually meant to take over as Bond. I'd like to have seen Pierce do one more, because Die Another Day let him down massively. You know, he was great, and that film was shocking. I'd love to see Dalton do one more. I think if I had to pick a Bond, I'd love to see Dalton do another one. He was way ahead of his time. License to Kill was brutal, and he was as close, I think, to the original novelisation of Bond. So I'd love to have seen him do another, but then it would have been GoldenEye, and that wouldn't have worked. But then it would have been GoldenEye, because it would have been a lot sooner, you know, late 80s to 1994. You know, they might not have even come up with that GoldenEye, you know, so it could have been something completely different. But yeah, in answering you, I'd say Dalton. I'd like to have seen him do another one.
So last top 5 question before we move on to some other bits. What are your top 5 Bond theme songs? And obviously you mentioned You Know My Name is your favourite, but also you said, you know, We Have All the Time in the World is up there. So what are the other songs that make your top 5?
Yeah, so You Know My Name, number 1, and We Have All the Time in the World is number 2. I love License to Kill by Gladys Knight. I just heard that recently. I went to the Sound of Bond at the Royal Albert Hall, and they'd done bits and bobs, and they played License to Kill there. There was another singer doing it, but it's awesome the way it introduces that. Da, da. You know, it's fantastic, and you can picture in your mind that opening scene of them walking up to Felix's wedding and having the church bells all of a sudden glide into the riff of License to Kill. Brilliant song. It's also my sister's favourite as well, I believe. Live and Let Die would be number 4. Paul McCartney and Wings. Great tune. Bit weird, bit of reggae chucked in there, you know. It's a bit of an oddity song, but it's a classic. Guns N' Roses done a cover. I don't know if everyone's heard it, but that is a damn good cover as well. So that's a good one at 4. And then 5 is quite a controversial one. A lot of people say it's Surrender. Don't know if you've heard it, by Casey Lang. It was actually the end song for Tomorrow Never Dies. But a lot of people have said it actually should be the main song. And I 150 billion times agree. It's such a great Bond song. And, you know, you don't necessarily have to have the title of the film in the song, like You Know My Name and, you know, probably not Quantum of Solace. That'd be a hard one to chuck into a song. But Surrender was a really, really great Bond song. And yeah, I'd love someone to do an edit of Tomorrow Never Dies and bring that into the front instead, and chuck the other one to the back. So yeah, I listen to that quite a lot. It's a good song.
Yeah, I agree with you. Surrender was the better song of the two, for sure. Well, that brings us to the end of our usual questions, but we're not going to let you go just yet, because it's our understanding that, and you're relatively famous for this, you've been covered in newspapers and on the news about your collection of Bond memorabilia. Now, you briefly touched on it at the start of the pod, but I'm going to let you go into a little bit more detail now. So tell us about all the things you own that are Bond related.
Yes, I've got a little bit. It's only a little bit. There was a lot more on my Instagram. I used to document it, but unfortunately it got hacked and my account got shut down, so I had to restart it, and I just haven't had the time to be able to do it like I did before. But I mean, yeah, I've been collecting Bond memorabilia for quite some time, probably. Like I said earlier, it's probably more from the 90s when I got into work and could earn a bit more. But I remember my first ever collectible was from my mum, bless her. She gave me the little Toyota Corgi car from You Only Live Twice, and I believe it was her nan that brought it for her, because her nan took her to the cinema to see it, and she never played with it. You know, as a little girl, don't want to play with a James Bond car. So it was immaculate, original Corgi box. The little bullets were still on that kind of plastic shell that you had to snap away, in its original paper little packet, you know, with the instructions on. So it's immaculate, and that was the first thing I ever got. And then it just grew from there, really. I had a few extra bits and bobs here and there. I'd say the collection really came on when probably late Brosnan, so from What Is Not Enough onward. And then I went back and brought older bits that I could as well. But yes, it's vast, from what it is really. There's screen used props that I've got from contacts. There's bits that you can buy normally like retail from 007.com and things like that. I've got some bits that were made specially, you know, from third party to be like a replica. I've got outfits. So I try not to buy shoes because I'm quite heavy on my feet, so I tend to wear the stuff that I do buy, and shoes would just be right off for 800 quid. I couldn't afford that. But I've got, for example, the full combat gear from No Time to Die, so the full outfit from MPL. I actually got the first set. They ran me whilst I was on holiday and told me when they were getting in, so they kept it for me. I've got his Rogue Territory jacket from when he reveals the Aston Martin Vantage in the lockup in No Time to Die. The tuxedos, obviously I've got the white tux from Spectre from Tom Ford. Some ties and bits and bobs like that. That's more clothing wise, but yeah, it's quite a vast array of props and bits and bobs really, that's then led into more things like you say with being in newspapers and TV and stuff.
So what's your most prized piece of memorabilia?
The car obviously means a lot because my mum gave it to me, as it would with everyone. I love the watches. I didn't get them through my work. I got them before I was in the watch industry, so I bought them at normal. So I've got a couple of those. So I had the first No Time to Die piece that came into the UK. So I've got that, and it's actually like a screen used version, because the one that you can buy now is actually different from what Craig wore in the film. Not that a lot of people know that. I'm actually wearing it today. I've got the Skyfall Planet Ocean 007 edition. I've got the Spectre Seamaster. I've also got the original 1995 Quartz Movement Seamaster 300 from GoldenEye, which is quite cool. I've got one of the old Seikos from Roger Moore era. I've got the Q watch from Swatch from No Time to Die as well. But I'd say yes, it's difficult to pin it down to one piece. Probably the car, just because of sentimental. But I've got other cool things. I've got believe it or not, a pack of matches that were used by Felix Leiter in No Time to Die. Now, these are screen used props. So you see this in the film. And he actually rips them off to light his cigar that he's smoking. And I think there's 2 matches missing from the pack because they'd done 2 takes. So they got the scene done in 2 takes. It's really cool because there's just 2 matches missing. They didn't get a new packet or anything like that. It is that. And so that's quite cool. I've got a Spectre ring that was used by one of the villains, but only an extra, but one of those. Safin's mask, the shattered mask. I think there was 500 of those that were sold. I've got one of those. I've got every pair of sunglasses that Daniel Craig's ever worn in the films. Which was ridiculous because he started off in Casino with 2 and then ended in No Time to Die with 4 pairs of glasses. Mental, like really 4 pairs of glasses. And there was one pair he wore and he was in that little plane that was coming off of Q's plane, to land on Safin's Island. You see him for 2 seconds. He puts them on to glide, and he takes them. They just vanish. Where are they gone? That's 400 quid's worth of glasses for 2 seconds. But yeah, so I've got those as well. But I've got a fair bit of the collection. It's pretty cool.
Is there a piece of memorabilia that you don't have that you wish you had, or you've had trouble getting hold of?
An Aston Martin DB5. So if anyone would like to donate one, not a corgi one. I've got plenty of them. I met a guy. I went to the launch of the new 60th anniversary Bond watch in London. Phenomenal event by Amiga. It was all secretive. It was really, really cool. They had a company called Secret Cinema there. So they actually reenacted Q Branch being attacked by Spectre, and then you had to go into Spectre's casino, and they had actors in there pretending to be spies, and yeah, crazy. I think I've put some of that on my Instagram as well. But yeah, so I went to that, and I was sitting next to this guy at the dinner table. I was about 5-6 seats away from Daniel Craig, and I was chatting to this guy, and he said, "Oh, well, why are you here?" I said, "I'm a Bond fan. I've got a big collection and stuff." He went, "Oh yeah." So I started telling him. He went, "Oh, I got nothing like that. Nothing." I was like, "Well, what have you got?" He went, "Oh no, nothing. It's nowhere near as good as yours." I went, "Well, go on. Any collection's awesome. You could have 2 things or 10 things. It doesn't matter." He went, "Well, I've got one of the Aston Martins." I went, "What, like the Corgi ones?" He went, No, I've got Daniel Craig's Aston Martin from Casino Royale. I've got the one from Quantum of Solace. I've got the one that actually was blown up in Skyfall." I was like, "What?" I was like, "What?" So he has all of the Aston Martins, and then he got called by Aston Martin because they said, "Oh, we've got this car you might like," and he turned up, and it was the press car that they used for Goldfinger. That had the cut out roof, and Honor Blackman was laying on it and stuff like that. And he just bought it, as you do. He just bought it. So yeah, he was cool, and I speak to him a lot now. But I think, yeah, if I could have anything, even though I don't have a driver's license, I would love an Aston Martin DB5. I'd just sit on it. I'd just sit in it, on my driveway, and just pretend I was cool.
I saw, was it an episode of Top Gear where they have replicas of the DB5 from Goldfinger, basically for sale. I think Paddy McGuinness drove one, and I'm sure he said that you can buy them for about 3.3 million. I'm sure that's what he said. So, and that's like a replica of the.
It's crazy. I know Pierce Brosnan kept the one from GoldenEye, from that opening scene. He kept that, but I'm sure he sold it. But you can't walk in and buy a DB5. They're custom built, or you'll buy an old one. And they did release the Bond editions of the Aston Martin, and each one was named after a film, and it had a plaque in the door and everything. But that DB5 is a cracker. So yeah, if anyone wants to donate one for a good cause, the Luke Fund is open.
Thank you for sharing the time on the podcast. For those of you who are interested in learning a bit more, check out Instagram, livelike007. And for the listeners out there, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Rating Room.
Well, that's this week's episode done. We hope you enjoyed it.
Special thanks to the band Sugar Tongue for the theme tune to The Rating Room. You can find them on all the usual social media channels, and be sure to check out their song The System, available now on Spotify.
You can find and message us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram by searching The Rating Room.
You'll find all our social media links on our website, theratingroom.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Or feel free to drop us an email at theratingroom@gmail.com. Goodbye, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week, right here on The Rating Room.